new, the Bhagavad Gita. What do you think?
That's just one version.
English. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Just checking. I'm not used to being photographed, so no, I can hold them like that. That's okay. Whatever you did is okay. Hare Krishna. Any particular part of the Bhagavad Gita that anyone likes?
Open up anywhere you want.
Okay. Well, this is an interesting spot. It's a series of verses. Actually, it's the second to the last section of the third chapter. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So I turned the page, it was text number 39 of chapter 3. But we'll go to text 36, which is the question that's being asked by Arjuna to Krishna. Oh yeah, not someplace it has to be translated. So if you have a device that has the scriptures on it, which I hope it has, if you're going to have a device, it should have at least a little bit of Krishna on it. What do you think? Good idea?
Yeah.
So this verse is quite interesting. Artikena payuktanam prapam karati purushaha anichan avibhashena bala eva niyojitaha. Very interesting question because Arjuna is questioning Krishna. He said, O descendant of Vishnu, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if one is engaged by force? Has anybody?
I was trying to explain what the text is.
Oh, yeah. Text 36, chapter 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
In China, they do it different. That's 10. That's 7. I'll read the commentary, purport by Srila Prabhupada. And we can see if we can get through 36, 37, 38, and 39. And then it culminates in 41, a lot of verses. So a living entity as part and parcel of the Supreme is originally spiritual, pure, and free from all material contamination. Therefore, by nature, he is not subject to the sins of the material world. But when he is in contact with the material energy, he acts in so many sinful ways without hesitation, and sometimes even against his will. As such, Arjuna's question to Krishna is very sanguine as to the perverted nature of the living entities. Although the living entity sometimes does not want to act in sin, he is still forced to act. Sinful actions are not, however, impelled by the supersoul within, but are due to another cause that the Lord explains in the next verse. So we can understand from this section that Prabhupada is saying that part and parcel, my Mangso, Jiva Loka, Jiva Bhuta, Sanatana, we're eternal parts and parcels of Krishna, have an eternal relationship with Krishna. that eternal relationship is based on love. We have an original loving relationship with the Supreme Lord. And now we've forgotten that relationship, and that's being described here. Because as part and parcel, we're originally spiritual, pure, and free from material contamination. But when one is in contact with material nature consists of the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And so, as being described here, and maybe in the next part, maybe I'll just explain it. When the living entity leaves the spiritual world, when we fall from the spiritual world into the material world, what happens is that we're originally pure Krishna conscious entities. And as we fall into the material nature, we become touched by the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And by that touch, our original pure love for Krishna becomes contaminated. And the next verse will explain that. It becomes contaminated by desire. Originally, we have desire. That is a natural component or part of our original inherent nature. Actually, by nature, anandamaya vyasat. By nature, we're searching for happiness. That's all we really want. Actually, everyone just wants to be happy when you really come down to it. Just like the word Veda, we study the Vedas because Veda means knowledge. And with knowledge, we have a chance to understand and maybe become happy. But rather than, relying on material knowledge, we really need, the Veda means true knowledge of our spirit self as part and parcel of Krishna, rather than thinking that ourselves, this material body. So it happens, does anybody here have any material desires? Raise your hand. Okay, that's a unanimous vote. Anybody here challenged by your material desires? Anybody wonder why they're so strong? Mm-hmm. We're getting a few flicks of the fingers now. We're stop asking questions. So what happens, just imagine, in the spiritual world, we're known, Ananda Mudibhara, it's like an ocean. It's like an ocean of transcendental happiness. Even Krishna says, Susukam Kartam Avyam. This process of bhakti is joyfully performed. So we're meant to be happy. So what happens is that when our pure nature, which is full of happiness and full of activity and full of spiritual desire, now becomes tinged by the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. And so that nature, that spiritual desire that we have in our relationship with Krishna is now covered over by the material energy. And so rather than finding that happiness that we originally had in our relationship with Krishna in the spiritual world, now we have to search for that same happiness, that unlimited happiness that's available in the spiritual world. We search that same amount of happiness in the material world. And that's ever expanding in the spiritual world. And here it's ever diminishing because this is like a reflection of the spiritual world. It's described in the 15th chapter, like a banyan tree on the thing. The roots are going up, but the branches are going down, so it's upside down. It's an upside down place. And so we may want to know, as Arjuna is saying here, why? Why am I being almost forced against my will to engage in sinful activities? And in verse, I'll just read the next verse in the part of the purport, because Krishna explains it. He says, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Kama Esha Koda Esha Rajaguna Samundavaha Mahasano Mahapapam Vijayanam Iha Varinam. So Krishna says, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion, and later transformed into wrath, which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So Prabhupada purport describes in the living entity, that's where it's at. When the living entity comes in contact with material creation, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust, in the association with the mode of passion. Or in other words, the sense of love of God becomes transferred into lust. And he gives an example. As milk in contact with sour tamarind is transformed into yogurt. Then again, when lust is unsatisfied, it turns into wrath. Wrath is transformed into illusion, and the illusion continues the material existence. Therefore, lust is the greatest enemy of the living entity, and it is lust only which induces the pure living entity to remain entangled in this material world. Wrath is the manifestation of the mode of ignorance. These modes exhibit themselves as wrath and other corollaries. If, therefore, the mode of passion, instead of being degraded to the mode of ignorance, is elevated to the mode of goodness by the prescribed method of living and acting, then one can be saved from the degradation of wrath by spiritual attachment. Does everybody catch that? Is it clear? Basically what I said before from the previous verse, that when we come in contact with the material creation, I don't like the word contaminated, but I'll say it anyway, we become contaminated by the modes of material nature. And our original love for Krishna is transformed into kama, a desire. Sometimes Prabhupada calls it, sometimes lust. In this verse he translates it as lust. We've heard him use the word desire in other lectures. And so this way, this desire, or this false desire, or this illusory desire, that we think we can become actually happy in this material world, is an illusion. I mean, I know everybody in this room has heard this example if you've been in the Hare Krishna movement for more than a week. Anybody not been here a week? Maybe your first time you hear it. There's a fish. You heard the fish out of the water? You? Yeah. The fish, he's in the water. He's doing okay, as fish would do in the water. And he sees people on the beach, and he thinks, I could probably be happier on the beach. So he goes out of the water. What's the chance of the fish being happy on the land? I was explaining it to a friend, and I said, you can give this fish an angel fish girlfriend, right? You can give him a fancy car. You can give him what kind of black platinum, whatever kind of credit card that nobody can get, and a condominium on the beach, a house in the mountains, whatever. The fish can't become happy, no matter how hard it tries. No matter what it's given, everything it's given. Just imagine the fish thinking that, okay, now I have a girlfriend. That's not working. Now I have a car. That's not working. Now I have a place in the mountains. It's not any better than the place on the beach. I'm gasping for something. I'm gasping for pleasure. I'm gasping for happiness. And I can't find it on the land. So what does the fish have to do to become satisfied? He has to go back into the water. So in the same way, we're somehow or another, we're in this place called material energy. Material energy is actually divine. An energy that's coming from Krishna is the external energy, and because it's coming from Krishna, it's divine. But when we misuse what we're doing here, Dharantiya, we've been sent to prison. We're all prisoners. How does that make you feel? Want to talk about being prison life for a while? How does it feel to be a prisoner? You feel good? Yeah. We go from cell A to cell B, or cell C to cell B to cell A, thinking that we're doing better, but we're still in jail. We're not going to get out. And so what happens, again, going back to that point, that we become touched by the material energy, and we try to somehow or another, like the fish out of water, we try to satisfy ourselves in this material world. But it's not going to happen. It doesn't happen. 30 years ago, I was working in Gurukul in Alachua, Florida, at a very wonderful school. And we were telling the boys that the problems of life are not material. The problems aren't material, the problems are spiritual. The lack of spiritual consciousness. Materially, nothing's going to make us any better. I mean, temporarily, we can get some so-called relief. But the idea is that the problem is lack of Krishna consciousness, or lack of spiritual consciousness, or lack of understanding who we are in relationship to Krishna. And so when we find ourselves in that position, it just goes down, as Prabhupada was saying in his purport. But once we come into this material world, we're engaged by the mode of passion to try to enjoy this world. And if we're not careful and try to raise that up by our activities dedicated to serving Krishna, then what happens is that automatically goes down. Material nature ultimately drags us down, because that's the nature of this place. We can't change it. So the idea is that if there's a purport somewhere, I can't remember, where Prabhupada says, like in the beginning of spiritual life, one must act as if in military discipline. Yeah. You read that before? Yeah, very beautiful, isn't it? Yeah. We have to be like army men. We have to be disciplined.
Niraja Maharaj was saying that in early years, it was a temple commander, and he was a military before. And he was quoting this text very often.
It's nice to have a previous military person as a temple commander. Maybe the temple treasurer also. So the idea, we like that military training, huh? You like them? You ready for it? You ready for the spiritual training that takes to get back to Godhead? It's not an easy military force to enter. You have to, it's like above special forces. It's above Navy SEALs. It's above whatever they have here. There's many trials and tribulations that one has to go through in order to shed the skin of this material energy. To peel it off, you have to really, really be ready. And we have to decide, am I really ready? What do I really want? What do I really want to accomplish? We were discussing that recently, that everybody is in want of an ultimate goal. But because we place the goals on material concepts, we're never satisfied. Because the real goal is to get to Krishna. The ultimate goal is to find Krishna. And when we find all these other temporary things, they always evaporate right in our hands. How many times have you desired something, got it? Let's just do it this way, because I won't ask personal questions. The nature of something, say you have a desire for something, and there's two choices. You either get it or you don't get it, right? You either get it or you don't get it. So if you get it, what happens? You get it, and it melts, and it doesn't work. You say you get a nice new car. My car is 15 years old. It's not working too well. I'm not going to buy a new one because I'm too old to drive now. But if I get a new car, I'll think, oh yes, wonderful, 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 I got a new car. And eventually the car breaks. So what do? As a man, my new car became an old car. Woe is me, boo-hoo. I'll just get a new one, then I'll be happy. Then I get a new one, and the same damn thing happens. This happens over and over again. So you don't end. Well, one time I was at Krishna House in Gainesville. Oh, what a wonderful place. I was in Krishna House in Gainesville. I was managing, and I had an office on the corner. But they tried yield signs, they tried stop signs, they tried a roundabout, they tried everything to stop the accidents from happening there. The city's just not smart enough to figure out it's a block away from 50,000 college students that don't know how to drive yet. They're 18, 19, 20 years old, and They shouldn't get a driver's license till they're like 25 or 35 because they're just not there yet. And so I was looking out, I heard a crash, which is not unusual from my office there. I look out the window, and in the US, when you get a new car, you get a paper tag and it's stuck on the back window. And when, like a week or two later, you get the metal tag. And there it was, brand new car with a paper tag, smashed to smithereens. And what do? Oh, my car, my car, my car. You lament. So you get it, and the end result is you lament. Right? You get it, you lament. And if you don't get it, oh, why couldn't I get that? Why couldn't I get it? So both result in lamentation. Whether you get it or don't get it, the result is the same. You ever lamented? You didn't get something? Ever experienced that? In America, they have daisies. He loves me, she loves me not, whatever you're supposed to do. And you play the daisy lottery. And you're sitting down, you're starting to figure out how many daisy petals are left. And you're thinking, it's not looking good. And everyone ends on not, even if it is yes, it's no. Like the spiritual world, yes means no. No means yes, whatever you want to say. So that's a little bit of the understanding how it degrades itself into anger. And anger, we can go to the second chapter and just get a little refresher course in anger. Oh, that's a wonderful verse. Anyway, I'm not going to do that. While contemplating the object of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, what develops? Lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. Same thing as this person. From anger, complete delusion arises. And from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. Rtadhavaja Swami Maharaja. We won't go the whole second chapter. Change the ether. Okay, next paragraph. The Supreme Personality of God has expanded himself into many for his ever-increasing spiritual bliss, and living entities are part and parcels of this spiritual bliss. They also have partial independence, but by misuse of their independence, when the service attitude is transformed into the propensity for sense enjoyment, they come under the sway of lust. That attitude is very important. It's mentioned in the introduction to the Nectar of Instruction that one's advancement in spiritual life depends upon the attitude of the practitioner. In other words, if we have a poor attitude or whatever kind of attitude, whatever attitude we have towards spiritual life, that we're going to reap. Basically, our attitude is as one surrenders unto Krishna, we're rewarded accordingly. And so our nature, our attitude is so, what would you say, important. It's very difficult. Somebody asked Rtadhavaja Maharaj, nowadays everybody has to be positive, you got to be like a good person, you got to be positive, you can't talk about bad things. And he says, so he asked, what is a good positive thing to tell people? Just tell them you're going to die. The material world is a miserable place. You're going to get old. You're going to get diseased. Rtadhavaja Maharaj, what would you say, dissected, disease, dis-ease. No ease, just opposite of ease, dis-ease, uneasy. And so our attitude is transformed into propensity. Just imagine, our attitude is originally loving Krishna. That's our constitution. That's what we're doing. And then all of a sudden our attitude changes for sense enjoyment. And then we become very, very lusty. Very lusty. So this material creation is created by the Lord to give facility to the conditioned souls to fulfill these lustful propensities. And when completely baffled by prolonged lustful activities, the living entities begin to inquire about their real position. Bhagavatics describe that spiritual understanding is basically for those who have become, what's the word? Just given up. Just, we've tried everything. We just can't find any way to become satisfied in this world. And when we get to that point, then what happens? We begin to inquire. Why? All I want to do is be happy. But why can't I be happy? What's going on here? I get a little taste once in a while, but it doesn't last. Why shouldn't it last? Why do I have to die? The introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada explains the meaning. They say, the purport says, just what is the Bhagavad Gita? And Srila Prabhupada says, the purpose of Bhagavad Gita. Very interesting way to would you say, somebody asks you, what is that camera? And you say the purpose of the camera. That's real, you can say it's a piece of plastic, you can say it's a piece of metal, but what is the purpose of something? So the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita is to deliver everybody in this material world from the nescience of material existence. I was explaining, actually my business card, my Hare Krishna business card, had a little excerpt from the introduction. It says, our very existence now is in the atmosphere of non-existence. Pretty cool statement by Prabhupada. Our very existence right now is in an atmosphere of non-existence. We're not meant to be threatened by non-existence. Here we are, we're meant to be in an eternal existence, but now we find ourselves in asat, that which is temporary. And so the Bhagavad Gita is there to extract us, to give us information how to overcome, which will be the 41st verse of this chapter, how to overcome this. So this inquiry, what is our real position? So Prabhupada explains that this inquiry is the beginning, where it is stated, Atato Brahma Jignasa, that one should inquire into the Supreme. And the Supreme is defined as Janmadhya Sajataha. The origin of everything is Brahman. So therefore, the origin of lust is also the Supreme desire. If therefore lust is transformed into love for the Supreme Lord, or transformed into Krishna consciousness, in other words, desiring everything for Krishna, then both lust and wrath can be spiritualized. Prabhupada gives two examples of how wrath is utilized in Krishna consciousness. Raise your hand if you know one. Yes.
Hanuman.
Hanuman. Yeah. Who is the other? Raise your hand if you know who else worked in wrath. Anger for Krishna. Yes.
Arjuna.
Arjuna. Yeah, Arjuna. And how can you be cool, calm, and collective in a battlefield? It just doesn't work, right? So here also in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is engaged upon the enemies with satisfaction of the Lord. Therefore, lust and wrath, when they are employed in Krishna consciousness, that's a really nice word, huh? Employed. Everybody likes to be employed in a nice, company. So we have a very nice company with Krishna and Arjuna. Become our friends instead of enemies. Now, this is an interesting verse that follows. It says, as fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of lust. So it goes, just like smoke is just a little covering, dust on the mirror is a little covering, but when we get covered by the womb, we're really down the level there. So there are 3 degrees of covering of the living entity by which his pure consciousness is obscured. This covering is but lust under different manifestations like smoke and fire, dust in the mirror, and the womb about the embryo. When lust compared to smoke is understood that the fire of the living spark can be a little perceived. In other words, when the living entity exhibits his Krishna consciousness slightly, he may be likened to the fire covered by smoke. Although fire is necessary where there is smoke, there is no overt manifestation of fire in the early stages. So this can be kindled. The idea of this analogy is that the fire can be kindled. It's a great opportunity, as we say sometimes, nip it in the bud. What time am I supposed to end? It's 7:10. 10:30 or 11? You have to give choices. Never give anybody an open choice.
Maharaj, our lectures normally are 45 minutes, but of course it can extend from that.
Okay. I gotta talk real fast.
No, you don't, Maharaj. It's all fine.
It's all good. The best process, to clear the mirror of the mind, Prabhupada says here, the best process is to chant the holy name. The embryo, covering the embryo, it's like, shows us how helpless we become when we fall into the material world. The embryo is really in a helpless condition. And Prabhupada was very adamant how sinful it is to take a child from the womb. Practically speaking, there's no greater sin than to do such a horrific act. Depriving some living entity of their home. Anyway. The covered mirror is compared to the birds and beasts, and smoke and covered fire is compared to human beings. In the form of a human being, the living entity may revive a little Krishna consciousness. I showed a little bit of a revival video to some of the men upstairs. Very powerful Christian preacher, Dr. T.D. Jake. Big, huge, African American guy that says, you got to get the mind out. You have to rejoice. You have to give everything to Krishna. If you don't get the mind out, I'd love to do lectures like that where I could walk around with a microphone and hold my head across the pulpit or whatever you call it. It was very like visually strong, very visually strong. Anyway, back to T.D. Jake. Human life is a chance for the living entity to escape the entanglement of material existence. Human form of life, one can conquer the enemy, lust, by cultivation of Krishna consciousness under able guidance. So the wise living, I'll just go through the verses here. The wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and burns like fire. The more material sense gratification we pour onto the fire of lust, the greater the blaze becomes. It doesn't go down. It only goes up. It may go down for a second, but then it rages. It just rages and takes care of us. The next verse is really nice. Indriyamana buddhi. That the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the places where this lust resides. This desire is in our senses, it's in our mind, and it's in our intelligence. So I'll just paraphrase this purport because Prabhupada explains that the enemy is lust. And so if you have the location of the enemy, then you have a chance to defeat that enemy. It's one of the challenges in what you call modern conflicts, is a lot of times you don't know where they are. They just sneak up with a backpack or whatever they do, they just show up someplace and it's 1, 2, but we don't know, we have no idea. Like the Battle of Kurukshetra, it was fought gentlemen's battle. They just, okay, we're going to go out to the field, we're just going to fight, the last guy went standing wins. Now the goal is collateral damage. The more collateral damage you can cause, the better your military force. And one person can cause so much collateral damage. Horrible. But it's really interesting. This purport is wonderful. I'm going to have to do just a little bit of justice to it, because the senses are just little things that go out and give us information. They bring information in. They're information gatherers. And then it's sent into the mind. And the mind, what it does, the mind is the center of all the activities of the senses. And when we hear about a sense object, then the mind generally becomes a reservoir of ideas for that sense gratification. And then Prabhupada says, and then it's sent down to the intelligence department. Next, the intelligence department becomes the capital of such lustful propensities. Now the challenge is because intelligence is the next door neighbor of the spirit soul. So when intelligence becomes inflicted by passion and ignorance, it takes on the false ego. That's where the false ego comes from. When intelligence becomes touched by the material energy, it takes on this ahankar, this false ego. And it's very, very, anyway, it's a really wonderful purport. And what happens is that, that this lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with matter and thus with the mind and senses. In other words, we just start to identify ourselves with this material body. Now, here's one of my favorite parts. Now, the spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying material senses and makes it its true happiness. Everyone knows if you repeatedly do something, you can become addicted to it. If you repeatedly take alcohol, you become an alcoholic. If you repeatedly take drugs, you become a drug addict. In the same way, if we continually engage ourselves in material sense gratification, we become addicted to it. Become addicted to it. And that false identity is really explained. Like sometimes I'll say, do they have AA in Finland? Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Eaters Anonymous? So many different anonymous. Let's just come forward. In the Hare Krishna, when we have SGA, Sense Gratifiers Anonymous. You go on from the Shri Gaur Nitai, Hare Krishna, Shri Gaur Nitai. My name is Maharaj and I'm an addict. First thing is acceptance. If we don't accept our fallen position in this world, we'll never be able to recover. We have to understand that we're in a foreign environment. We're in a dangerous place. I was reading in the 6th canto with Ajamil about a month and a month and a half ago. And Prabhupada said when Ajamil went out, he saw a Sudra man, a low-caste man embracing a prostitute. And there was a spark of desire that was latent within the heart. And it became so strong that it overcame his Brahminical nature. Because that lust began to burn like fire and burn and burn and burn and burn. He couldn't do anything. I mean, it was like he became helpless. Of course, we know the story. He married a prostitute. When he was in his 80s, he sired another son and named him Narayan, and somehow another, he called out the name of Narayan at the time of death and was protected. The Prabhupada says, in that time, there was only one low-class person on the street embracing a prostitute. Now he says, at every street corner, there's a low-class person embracing a prostitute. And therefore, it's very difficult to overcome this material desires. Do they allow billboards in Finland, like those signboards? No. It's horrible. I mean, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. What can we do? Sometimes devotees say they've been engaged in what Prabhupada called practical activities. Practical engagement. He called working like for those engaged in practical activities. It's very good to chant Hare Krishna. And so, Yeah. And that's actually the formula for everything, isn't it? I would tell like young men would come to me, married couples that come to me and say, Mars, have to work with all these ladies, have to work in a company, and you have to go out to lunches, you have to do this, you have to do that. And he says, there's so many beautiful ladies. And I said, there's no way you're not gonna see a beautiful person. But that you can't avoid. In this age, you're gonna go out, if you're gonna, unless you lock yourself, or like Prabhupada said, the brahmacharis are agitated because the ladies are chanting in the temple and they should go to the forest. Like, no, let's go to the forest, You're not gonna see any ladies out there. But what was the name, that place we go to near Vrindavan, where that one sage was meditating in the water? Completely under the water, he saw a couple of fish copulating, and he said, fell down and married like 9 ladies or something. So even if you go to the forest, you go into the ocean, you're gonna find something out there. They're doing something that you're not gonna want to see that they're doing. And we'll fall down. So I tell the young men, it's impossible. Of course I don't. I do talk to young ladies sometimes in the group, but specifically young men. And I say, to see something is unavoidable, but to take a look is avoidable. To see and turn away, we can do. Rtadhavaja, strong determination. But to turn our head back and take a second look, watch out. Watch out, don't take that second look. If you take that second look, that's putting your foot or hand in Maya, and you're going to get burned. Fire burns a child. Fire burns an adult. That's the nature of fire. And fire is very, very strong, like lust. For the last couple minutes, overtime. It's tied right now. We have to have overtime. The very nice conclusion to this verse. Tasmat tvam indriyam yardam niyam yama bharatharshavaha papamanam pajja yenam gyana vijnana nasana. Therefore, in the very beginning, O Arjuna, curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Niyama, yama, niyama, asana, we know these words are there. One time Rita and Anandamars analyzed niyama, or maybe even this verse. He's like a genius in Sanskrit. And so niyama means to restrict the senses. So we can either do it voluntarily, or Yamaraj will do it for us. We can just get in that type of body that we don't have a choice. We can only do certain things at certain times. And we only eat and sleep and mate and defend according to our particular boundaries. We'll lose that independence that is allowed to human beings, that gives us the advantage to understand our original relationship with Krishna. That's ripped away. That's just stripped right away from us. We have no chance. A dog has no chance. A pig has no chance. What is it? Hog, dog, camel, and ass. That was the first class I ever heard from Shiva Maharaj when I moved into the temple or visited the temple. I think he gave like a 2-hour class, 30 minutes on each one. At the end of the class, I looked at my friend and I said, I'm a hog, a dog, and a camel. The Prabhupada's beginning of the purport is very beautiful, and I'll just read that out. The Lord advised Arjuna to regulate the senses from the very beginning so that he could curb the greatest sinful enemy, lust. Well, in the translation it says, and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. And Prabhupada says, this great sinful enemy, lust, which destroys the urge for self-realization. In other words, we have a natural inquisitiveness to understand who we are, what's going on in this place. And it's just a place of darkness. We have no idea. Om Gyan Taranandasha. We know that we're born in darkness. And we need spiritual guidance to open the heart so that we can see what's going on. And then Prabhupada says, and specifically knowledge of the self. Specifically a knowledge of who we are is destroyed. We begin to think that we're this material body, and this is the source of this is my only source to find pleasure. Either be it through my senses, through my mind, through my intelligence. These are my only sources to become happy in this world. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that at all. Okay, I could finish it. I have more things to say, but I'll put them on till my next visit. Now someone's saying, Mars, when are you going to visit? Yeah. And I'll say on the 1st. I learned this from going to Ride Mars, my late date, one wonderful Vaishnava. He would say, yeah, I'm coming on the 1st. Oh, really? Yeah, the first chance I get. The next time I have frequent flyer miles on American Airlines that shares with Finnair, I'll be in Helsinki.
Well, that's your most welcome.
Yeah, thank you. So, any thoughts? Any questions? Any ideas from our discussion? Yes, the military man. We'll call him GI. Instead of GI Joe, we'll call him GI Prabhu.
So you finalize that the process is, in the beginning, we must understand that we are not this senseless body, and this is beginning of the process of taking over, like from the last. Is
that a question?
It's kind of question. It's a Russian question.
Russian question? That's the first Russian question I heard. Very wonderful question. Yeah, we have to have a basic understanding. There's inquiry. That's natural for everyone. That's probably saying this. In other words, it destroys the urge for self-realization. That lust will just will cover us. So that's like really being like the mirror covered by dust. Bird, animal. What to speak of being like covered by the embryo. It's total darkness. So we get a little glimpse in the human form of life. It's a special gift. Get a human body is unbelievably like hitting the lottery. I was in like just say in this room right here, there's probably 60 bazillion, gazillion, quadrillion, illions of living entities in this room right now. And there's only 30 human beings. Hopefully they're all advanced human beings. Just like in our body, there's 10 trillion living entities, I think. They say 10 trillion cells or something like that. So it's 10 trillion.
A lot.
It's a lot, yeah. And just imagine there's like 10 trillion times 30 or 40. So we're really getting up in the numbers here. Not to speak of all the other living entities that are hanging out here. The worms, the germs, so many different things. So just to get this body is such a gift. Krishna is so kind. And even though we personally rejected his kindness, we rejected his everything. We just rejected everything that he was giving us to try to enjoy separately from him. And still he's so kind, he gives us a venue to get out. He gives us a venue to get out. There was some time ago, Rita Nandamar was explaining how the fact that we have independence and can leave the spiritual world makes it perfect. Because if we had to stay when we didn't want to stay, it wouldn't be perfect. And the nature, as Prabhupada said in that Deviation Guna Mahavers, that we have the opportunity to get out of prison through this process. Because if there wasn't a process to get out, the material creation that Krishna made, which is perfect, Om Pranamada, Pranamidam, Purnam, Purnam, Udachate, the whole place is perfectly organized. And it has to give us a venue to get out. So we get the human form of life. That's the key to the door. Then we gotta put it in. Turn it and open that door and step in. Step in. Remember about the TD? Step into the moment. Step into that moment. "13 minutes over? Not bad. Anything else from the esteemed group of Vaishnavas?
Bhakta TD was your friend.
Please?
Bhakta TD was your friend. Is your friend.
Like the TDJ, yeah, we're gonna have him shave up one day. He's actually shaved up, he just has to shave his beard.
You know him personally.
Yeah, through that video. Actually, the church is in Dallas. That big mega church is in Dallas. And I discovered about the TDJ during COVID. Somebody sent me something or bumped in. I like to, in my spare time, study a little bit of theology, to understand the different points of religion, not how they connect, but how to deal with it, And they came across Dr. TDJ. And they came across Dr. Vernon too. Dr. Vernon's really got a lot to say. I'll show you that one later on. It's hilarious. How the African American preachers let it go. I don't want to say 6 guns blazing because I don't think they use guns. Yeah, they don't. There's no holds barred. Like in the wrestling, if there's certain things you can't do. When it comes to black Christian preachers, forget it. It's open season. This is open season. Dr. TDJ. Something else? Okay, thank you so much for your kind association and for taking the time out of your day to come to the temple. Please receive the blessings of Srila Prabhupada in this wonderful, wonderful place that you have created here, an association. Take the blessings of Sri Gauranitai. Prabhupada says that one cannot understand the level of compassion that Lord Nityananda has. So revel, to stay fixed in that compassionate association of Sri Gauranitai. What a wonderful place to reside. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Krishna.
His Holiness Rtadhavaja Swami Maharaja ki